I'm informing the House about further steps the Government is taking to address the Horizon scandal. The Government is taking measures to speed the flow of compensation. We have already set a target of issuing initial offers for 90% of group litigation order cases within 40 days of receiving a completed application. And I announced in November that we would be introducing a £600,000 upfront offer for claims with overturned convictions, which people could choose to take rather than going through the detailed assessment process. This has already made a real difference. Before my announcement, only 5 of those people had reached full and final settlements. I can now report that with the help of the minimum payment, we have finalised 30 cases. This has obviously speeded up matters along for those who have taken this upfront offer. It's also helped those who have chosen individual assessment because resources can be concentrated on those cases. I can announce today that we are taking similar measures in respect of the group litigation order scheme. We will now make people in that scheme an upfront offer of £75,000, which will save them having to go through a full assessment. But, as with overturned convictions, if they believe they're entitled to more, they are welcome to continue with the full assessment. Not only will this allow the Department to focus its resources on the larger cases, it will allow claimants' lawyers to do the same. The pace at which we can get claims into the scheme is the key constraint on how quickly we can settle them. The upfront offer is smaller for the GLO scheme than that for the overturned convictions because the claims tend to be smaller. We estimate that perhaps a third of GLO claimants may want to consider this route. I'm sure the House will welcome this measure. When I made my statement on Monday, I heard all parts of the House share my desire to ensure justice for postmasters who have been convicted of offences as part of the scandal. The whole House is united on this, and I believe that in the light of last week's excellent ITV series, I think the whole nation is united on it too. We've all been moved by the stories of postmasters who have been unjustly convicted and the terrible effects over a period of 2 decades of their finances, their health and their relationships. Indeed, we have seen whole lives ruined by this brutal and arbitrary exercise of power. Hundreds of convictions remain extant. Some of those convictions will have relied on the evidence of the discredited Horizon system. Others will have been the result of appalling failures of the Post Office investigation and prosecution functions. The evidence, which is already emerging from Sir Wyn Williams' inquiry, has shown not only incompetence but malevolence in many of their actions. This was evidence which was not available to the courts when they made their decisions on individual cases. So far, 95 of over 900 convictions have been overturned. We know that postmasters have been reluctant to apply to have their convictions overturned. Many of them have decided that they've been through enough and they cannot face further engagement with authority. Many fear having their hopes raised only to be dashed yet again. The Horizon Compensation Advisory Board has recommended that we should overturn all the convictions of the postmasters who were prosecuted in the Horizon scandal. I think their motivation for doing so is absolutely right, and we will work with them to speed up the process. Can I put on record my thanks to Lord Arbuthnot, who's in the gallery today, and also the Right Honourable Member for North Durham for their work on this campaign generally and on that advisory board. Following their recommendation would involve quite unprecedented action by Parliament to overturn specific verdicts of the courts. The Government, of course, completely recognises the importance of an independent court system and judiciary. So this recommendation raises important issues of constitutional principle. This is therefore not a decision we can take lightly. It also creates the risks of a different sort of injustice. I'm sure that a great many people were wrongly convicted in this scandal, but I cannot tell the House that all of those prosecuted were indeed innocent, or even that it was 90% or 80 or 70. Without retrying every case, we cannot know. So the risk is that instead of unjust convictions, we shall end up with unjust acquittals, and we just do not know how many. The only way we could tell would be put all cases through the courts, further dragging out the distress for many innocent people.
Order. Can I just say, this is a very important issue. I'm going to allow the Minister to continue, but I'm going to say to the opposition, your time also increases with the others, and to Sir David as well. It is important and too important an issue to curtail it. But I would say to officials, they really ought to be aware that when they do provide speeches, it is for 3 minutes. But I do want you to fulfil this because the issue is far, far too important. Minister.
Can I thank you for that, Mr. Speaker? And I apologise for the length of this statement, this urgent response to the urgent question, but it is, as you say, of vital importance. So we have been faced with a dilemma: either accept the present problem of many people carrying the unjustified slur of conviction, or accept that an unknown number of people who have genuinely stolen from their post office will be exonerated or perhaps even compensated. I can therefore announce that we intend to bring forward legislation as soon as we can to overturn the convictions of all those convicted in England or Wales on the basis of post office evidence given during the Horizon scandal. The Government will, in the coming days, consider whether to include the small number of cases that have already been considered by the appeal courts and the convictions upheld. We recognise this is an exceptional step, but these are exceptional circumstances. As the House knows, people with convictions which have been overturned are offered a choice between having their compensation individually assessed or settling on an upfront offer of £600,000. So as far as possible, we want to avoid guilty people walking away with hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money. But we cannot make the provision of compensation subject to a detailed examination of guilt. Because we have concluded that to do so would be unfair to individuals to ask the court to do that again. And we cannot turn this into an administrative exercise. So all we ask is that as part of their claims of compensation, postmasters sign a statement to the effect they did not commit the crimes of which they're accused. Anyone subsequently found to have signed such a statement untruthfully will be putting themselves at risk of prosecution or fraud. I do not pretend to the House that this is a foolproof device, but it is a proportionate one which respects the ordeal with which these people have already suffered. It means that an honest postmaster will have his or her conviction overturned, and just by signing one document can secure compensation. No one should take our decision as a criticism of the judiciary. Their original decisions were taken in good faith, in the understanding that prosecutions were properly conducted and that assertions about the robustness of the Horizon system were true. But as I said earlier, these are exceptional circumstances and we need to act quickly and decisively. Time is one thing that we and the convicted postmasters do not have. Our arrangement will apply to all those convicted in England and Wales based on post office investigations, including those prosecuted by other bodies who relied on the product of those investigations, the fruit of a poisoned tree. We have plenty more work to do on this solution. We need to prepare the legislation, and I want to discuss our solution with the advisory board. I'm meeting them later this afternoon. Some prosecutions have been undertaken in Scotland and Northern Ireland, where justice is devolved. We are, of course, engaging the Scottish and Northern Irish administrations in respect of wrongful convictions in their jurisdictions. We will do these things as quickly as we can and keep the House informed. The House will have heard that we are well aware of the imperfections of this solution. I'm sure that this will attract some critics. But when they're criticised, of course, I then invite them to say what they would do otherwise. Would they leave many people suffering under the burden of unjust convictions for many years, or perhaps forever, with no access to compensation? Or would they create some administrative process for deciding innocence which is more onerous for the victims? So I very much hope the whole House will stand with the Government to deliver rapid justice to convicted postmasters who have been waiting much, much too long.
Can I just say, I will extend the time. I think it was so important to get all of this on the record. I do believe you did want to make a statement, but you're overruled. But at least we've certainly got the statement now. David Davis. Sir
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister said earlier this week, many of us across the chamber call for this appalling injustice to be solved in months, not years. And it looks as though the government has responded correctly to that, to that call, ensuring swift justice for those affected. But undoubtedly there are difficult constitutional and legal issues involved in this, as he laid out in detail. Some of the victims I've spoken to say they need an individual exoneration rather than a grand pardon, because they are understandably concerned at being bracketed with a very small number of people who will actually not be innocent. Now, will the Minister give us an undertaking to continue to look into this matter to address these quite proper concerns for the legitimate victims? I would also welcome further elaboration on the issue of compensation. Fujitsu has played a central role in this scandal and is still at the heart of government IT systems. Can the Minister tell the House whether Fujitsu will be required to meet some of the costs of the undoubtedly enormously expensive compensation we're paying out? And finally, will the government accelerate the investigations to convict those who are really guilty of causing this scandal by perverting the course of justice?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his urgent question and for his collaboration with us on these matters. Of course, we look very carefully at the issue of individual exoneration. That we didn't see any way possible to do that without an exhaustive and time-consuming administrative process, which would add further burdens, so the burdens people have already suffered during this process. The other issue is getting people to come forward, again, which has been one of the major issues in getting people to appeal their convictions. So we saw this very much as the lesser of two evils in terms of the solution we have adopted. But nevertheless, we are very keen to discuss mitigations and safeguards with other members of the House. I set out one in my remarks earlier on, and one of the requirements to sign a statement of innocence. But I'm very keen to work with him to look at other mechanisms we can use to make sure that these people who do get their convictions overturned in access compensation are actually innocent of the charges. He raises the point about Fujitsu. A very important point has been raised many times. As he knows, a part of what the government did, it put in place a statutory inquiry. Sir Win Williams is chairing that inquiry. It is due to complete by the end of the year and hopefully report soon after. At that point in time, we'll be able to assess more clearly who is actually responsible. I know many people may have formed a view on that already, but we think it's right that we follow a process. We've identified individuals or organisations who are responsible for this scandal. Of course, those organisations we would expect then to financially contribute. So there are financial and legal measures we can take, and as regards individuals, of course, it may well be there's sufficient evidence for the authorities to take forward individual prosecutions, and I think many in this House would welcome that.